Sundays are no longer a day of rest since Donald Trump became president. An activist movement called Solidarity Sundays is growing in Brooklyn and across the U.S. Their goal is to organize the resistance against Trump's agenda.
Now, what started in California is now up to 175 groups at last count. That movement has reawakened many activists and also created some new ones. They've celebrated victories and are learning how to prepare themselves for what they see as the long fight ahead.
Joining us to talk about Solidarity Sundays are two Brooklyn organizers. Erin Paglia, am I pronouncing that?
Yeah, you got it.
Is co-founder of the Brooklyn Resistance. Welcome to BK Live. And Ryan Kuonen is co-founder of the Williamsburg chapter. Glad to have you both with us here on BK Live.
Absolutely.
Erin, let's start with you.
Okay.
Because you've made kind of the bigger switch here, right? You are a stay-at-home mom, you're in grad school, you weren't an activist before, and now you're co-founder of a chapter. Tell us about this, she wasn't busy enough. Tell us about this transformation.
I think after the Women's March, there were all these headlines. Is this a movement? Is this a moment?
Yeah.
And I felt so passionately that it couldn't just be a moment, it had to do more. And so I was kind of waiting to see, like, okay, who's gonna lead us? And there was all this fractioning in the DNC. And then it was like, oh, we are going to lead us.
Right.
And so I got together with a friend of mine, Elizabeth Cohen, and we just said, let's form a group. And we shot out some emails and we got like 200 replies of people sitting at home wanting the exact same thing.
So, Ryan, you had been involved before, very politically active. So you've got a long view of these sort of actions, but how does this moment feel?
Well, it felt like it was time to move things from like more passive and just within known networks to like outreaching to like the wider public and kind of really being like, okay, there's a lot of us that feel the same way. How can we work together to make change and make it through what we see as kind of terrible times.
Right, and how to keep it going, right?
Yeah,
Because I feel like a lot of us felt that initial kind of galvanization, but then didn't really know how to keep it organized. So how do you guys do it? Walk us through.
Well, that's the whole point of it, is the only way this is sustainable is if you build a community and it doesn't feel like work. Because we all have jobs and people, you know, they have their full-time job or they have kids, and now we're all part-time activists or full-time activists. So if we can make it, dare say, enjoyable, then maybe we'll continue to do it. And then also you're sitting at home and you're thinking, well, I can send my one postcard or make my one phone call. But when you come together with a group, you see its impact. And also if you need to take a step back, somebody else is there to kind of run with the ball until you can check back in.
Right. And the energy of being in a room with people, I mean, for me, the secret is food. So like we cook and have dinner, and like we have a 4-hour conversation that just really like evolves, and like sometimes it's like really like active activists. Right. Sometimes it's just like someone who's like, how do I do this? But like the conversation itself just really energizes you to make it through the next few weeks, to do those things at home, to talk to people, you know, just all of that stuff.
Right.
So this is a thread that I'm interested in on the same speed, where it's like you do have all this passion and you feel these feelings, and then you're spurred to action, but then the sustaining the thing, like it's a long road to hoe to keep that thing. So there's an element of self-care there with getting together and having a meal and all that stuff. But how do you keep that fire going when you sort of wake up to a fresh new hell every day?
Right. Well, we celebrate our victories, and also we don't linger on the defeats. Our whole thing, we commiserate certainly, but our whole thing is action. What is the next action? You know, what are we gonna do? So that's how we focus on it. And then plus the group is so much about education and empowerment. So many of us had no idea how the system worked. Right. So it's been an education for us to learn, and I'm really thankful for it in that respect.
And I think in New York, because we are blue, especially in Brooklyn, because we're like deep, deep, dark blue, we get this idea that we don't have work to do, that there's not things that we can be working on in our own local. And like New York, Albany has crazy red up in there, and there's things that happen and communities that we need to actively work and protect. And like by having the conversation and making sure that we're all learning how to do it and how to talk to our assemblymen and get people to react more to like the feelings that we all know exist here, but maybe because the way our the way politics is here doesn't necessarily get reflected in the laws that are passed or like things that happen on the street.
So that ties into this. Yeah, we're watching some of the meetings we've been playing, some of you guys in action. But I wondered, looking at that perspective of how deep blue it is here and then seeing the disconnect that can happen between us and Albany, there's also a national template that that all of the groups are following. So how does that play in and like balance our local things with the national actions?
Well, Solidarity Sundays really encourages us to do what feels right to us. So there are national initiatives, and we work with lots of other groups, Wall of Us, ACLU's Power People, what is it for ACLU? People Power?
People Power.
People Power, yeah. But then they also encourage us to really do what feels right. So my group, we have been focusing on being a sanctuary human. If sanctuary cities don't really exist, then how can you sort of keep your side of the street clean and be a sanctuary human? We've also been learning a lot about how just purple New York is. We thought we were so deep blue. It's really purple. There are a lot of things like the abortion laws that are on the books for New York. If Roe v. Wade were to get overturned, we would go back to pre-Roe v. Wade status, criminalizing a woman's right to choose. So there are things like that we just had no idea, and now it's relevant, and so now we have to do something about it.
Right, and how also do you try to affect change in these other states, right? Because I feel like I feel often that powerlessness of like, oh, we're in New York, I don't really know how to do stuff in these other states.
We had some good stuff. I think that being part of this network, you get access to other people and they put things up and it filters through. And so oftentimes we have a little side area where we're like, if you know people in these states, here are things that you can do. And so oftentimes we'll have someone that are like, hey, I know people in Tennessee, and we'll get in and call and like talk to their sort of red friends or like motivate their activists that feel very alone in Utah. I have like an amazing community of like liberal women in Utah, and oftentimes we spend some of our stuff helping them on things that they feel like they need more support with. So I think it had like what I loved about it and why like I was so stoked that like Kate, Leslie, and Jenny, the women in California that started it, that they did it is they made it with this framework for all of us as women across the country to really feel connected. And I think that's, for me, what has changed since Trump is elected. I feel much more connected to what happens in Utah and Nebraska and Iowa than I ever did before.
And they like us to focus locally, what we can do locally. That's sort of where we can make the most change. Then I'm from Georgia, and so I, with John Ossoff and everything, I would call people in Georgia that I knew, and they would say, you know, there's just nothing that we can do. We just have no power. And I was like, no, you have to understand, you do, and we're all counting on you. We're here to support you.
So you guys, there have been parallels drawn. Obviously, it's like a bizarro world Tea Party. You're like same but different, where it's like
taking over Congress in 2018.
Women at the front instead of men, and you're not fighting for this agenda. But we see what happened, like with the healthcare and the AHA, and the way that the Tea Party is really asserted and inserted themselves into the political discourse. So I wonder if you learned any lessons from them that you want to apply for good.
For sure. I mean, the whole Indivisible Guide is about taking what the Tea Party started and then sort of co-opting their ideas. And I think a lot of it is based on the success that they had and trying to replicate that for ourselves.
And from what I've seen just from like the Women's March and like the people that come, like the Tea Party started much smaller than we have started. We still have a lot of work to do, and it takes like being organized and staying engaged. Because one thing that is sort of amazing about them is that they stayed engaged and like really kept it up, and we have to do the same, which I think is hard sometimes for people to do. So that's really the motivation, is to look at how they did it and replicate it times a million.
So one of the specific things that you guys, I know, I feel your listen.
The post office is happy that you guys are still They needed the work.
Yeah, speaking of, because there's this postcard avalanche. And we have some of your postcards, I think, to show here. I have done this with some of my friends, and I think it's such a wonderful thing to really put your own handwriting onto something and really express yourself and send it to all these different people. How do you guys figure out who you're focusing on in a particular moment? Does everyone send to a different person? Do you guys kind of say, we're all writing to this person today for this?
I mean, the organizers in California start out with an info script, but they give us the ability to also adapt it. So we usually have a couple of national things that we're doing, and then we add in our own local things. The last time was environmentally themed, so we added postcards to our local council person about some plastic recycling bills are going through city council, and like just kept, like we try and have a level in each of it. Our next one is on Sunday, and I live in Williamsburg right next to Nighthawk, and we're going to open up our sort of garden and get anyone that walks by to send a postcard about Planned Parenthood to wherever they're from, and we're going to try and see if Williamsburg can avalanche from all around the country. But I think it's a fun idea to play with, and like it really does feel like you're doing something, and it helps. You can get out a lot on a postcard.
And Erin, it's like a visceral thing, and the person on the other end, it's not like inbox, like you have a deluge of opinions coming at you.
Right, exactly, and that's what we're seeing is. When we can come together around an issue and create that impact, I mean, there's strength in numbers, and it makes a lot more of a statement.
What kind of a response do you get from the postcards?
We have only gotten responses. Well, we also write postcards and letters to support our electeds who are listening to us and
Keep up the good
listening
work.
to their And so we have received responses from that. People saying thank you, telling us why the issue that they are supporting is personal to them. And which makes us want to fight so much more. It's those personal stories.
Good feedback loop going on.
Exactly.
So I wanted to ask, speaking of feedback loops, this is on the other end. So Donald Trump was, he was out there campaigning, and like you say a lot of things, and even people who voted for him that like take you seriously versus literally kind of thing. I wonder if you guys are feeling any outreach, if he's trying to build any bridges, like if you're hearing any of the Ivanka in him coming out, like is he reaching out in your view or trying to smooth anything?
No.
Not
Short answer.
I haven't seen anything that looks like that at all. I mean, I would feel like a moderate way to reach out would be talking to Chuck Schumer, since it doesn't seem that happening, like even the more. But no, I mean, I like deal with a lot of communities of like undocumented people and like on the border, and I feel like there's a lot of these issues where it feels like he's charging ahead that even his supporters didn't think he was serious about.
Right.
So
Do you feel like
it feels like the opposite?
Really, than we thought?
I think so. I mean, I had a lot of hope, and I was talking to my friends, and we said, well, every president doesn't keep every campaign promise. And so we were hoping the more absurd ones he might table, and that was just really more to ignite his base. But no, he seems pretty set on honoring every single one of them. So it's about as bad as we thought.
Can we close out on the other end of the spectrum?
Yes.
Because there's so many phenomenal women who are at the front of from Black Lives Matter to this movement now, and women are really taking the lead.
But it's not just women. We need men.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we need everybody. Like, write your postcards, dudes. But the point is, in the leadership capacity, women have always led the way. But specifically, do you see any other women on the horizon? We know that Hillary won the popular vote, but what other women do you see stepping forward in that vein who can challenge a Trump or anyone like him?
Kristen Gillibrand is rocking my world. She's the only senator that voted no on every appointee. I feel like she's very much taking a stand, and she's like a woman, especially as a New Yorker, a woman to watch and engage with and like support and see what's in the future.
So many rock stars, Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, of course, and then Sewell, is it Terry Sewell from Alabama? She's Congresswoman Sewell. I think so. Anyway, she's incredible. But yeah, people a lot of times think that Solidarity Sundays is just women. We run the show, but we welcome all genders, and we definitely acknowledge that it's going to take all of us. And so I could get behind a man just as soon as I could get behind a woman. We just want somebody who's really going to take the needs of all Americans to heart and not one tiny demographic.
All right. How do we get in touch? How do we join? Let the people know.
SolidaritySundays.org is the national website, so anyone from wherever can look up and see if there's a chapter, and if there's not a chapter, start one.
And
it's
we have
like the best.
Yeah, we have daily action. So if you just want to Solidarity Sundays yourself from home, every day there's a recommended action you can take.
Right, and if you happen to be walking by Nighthawk,
Peek in.
I love that idea. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the work you do.